You could be surrounded by people and still feel like a ghost, smiling, nodding, talking, and yet, deep inside, there's a silence so loud it drowns everything out. That ache, that invisible distance between you and the world, it doesn't come from solitude. It comes from never quite feeling seen, even in the center of the crowd. Since you were young, something about you didn't match the script. You felt things more intensely. You asked the kind of questions that made adults uncomfortable. You saw the shadows behind smiles, the tension in a room before anyone said a word. While others brushed off what they couldn't explain, you felt it all, and then blamed yourself for not being able to ignore it. They called you too quiet, too intense, too sensitive. Eventually you believed them. You thought you were the problem. You twisted yourself into shapes you were never meant to hold, just to keep the peace, just to blend in. You learned to laugh on cue, hide your questions, and shrink your soul into something easier to digest. But what if that ache wasn't a flaw? What if it was a message? A call to remember what the world tried to make you forget? You were never meant to fit a mold. You were meant to become something entirely your own. And that path often starts in loneliness, sacred, aching loneliness. It's the price of separating from who they told you to be, of walking away from what never truly felt like home. You tried to play the game, you tried to care about the things that lit up everyone else, but somewhere deep inside, your soul kept tugging at your sleeve, whispering, "No, not this." That tug never stopped, even when you ignored it, even when you buried it beneath performance and people-pleasing. It waited. It always waits. And now, you're tired. Tired of pretending. Tired of twisting your truth. Tired of conversations that skim the surface, of connections that feel like mirrors reflecting nothing back. You long for something real, depth, meaning, resonance. But that longing makes you feel even more alone, like no one else hungers the same way. Like you're defective for needing more. You are not defective, you're awake. You sense things most people never will. You feel the weight behind a single word, the heartbreak behind a smile. You walk into a room and feel the stories no one is telling. That's not weakness, that's your gift, and yes, it comes with a price. You see through the illusions. You feel through the armor, you hear the truth even when no one speaks it. But that doesn't mean you're broken, it means you're becoming. And that becoming is messy, painful, disorienting. You don't get to wake up without first letting parts of you die. The parts you wore to survive, to blend in, to be acceptable. The masks, the filters, the layers. They serve their purpose, but now they're suffocating you. Your soul's begging for air. You don't need to be understood by everyone. You don't need the whole world to see you. You just need to stop abandoning yourself. Because the truth is, you were never lost. You were just buried. Under expectations, under fear, under all the noise of what they wanted you to be. And now, finally, you're starting to hear the sound beneath the noise. The heartbeat of your own truth. Faint, maybe, but steady. And it's calling you back to yourself. Not the version of you they preferred. Not the one who learned to stay small. But the one who was always too deep, too much, too different for a world that's only just beginning to wake up. Who looks outward only dreams, but those who turn their gaze inward awaken. This awakening doesn't come gently. It begins with a deep ache, a feeling of alienation that creeps in slowly. It's not that something is broken inside you, it's that something profound is calling for healing, for truth. You weren't made to fit into a mold of normalcy. You were made to be real, raw, and unfiltered. The world often asks us to trade our authenticity for acceptance, and for a time you may have done just that, learning to hide the parts of yourself that felt too much, too different, too sensitive. You learned to mute your intuition, stifle your insights, quiet your emotions, but the more you bury these truths, the louder the unrest grows beneath the surface. There is a memory your soul holds on to fiercely, that you were never meant to blend into the crowd. You were born to see beyond the facade, to feel beneath the noise. This is why you feel disconnected, not distant, but deeply tethered to something the world seems to have forgotten. You move through spaces feeling the invisible weight of others' pain, sensing emotions people try to mask with smiles. Crowds don't energize you. They drain you, not because you dislike people, but because you absorb what others overlook. When you try to explain this sensitivity, it's dismissed as drama or overreaction, so you fall silent, carrying a weight too dense for words. That silence isn't emptiness, it's full of perception, emotion, and a hard truth. And that fullness makes ordinary spaces feel too small, too shallow. If you've ever felt like you're too much or not enough, like you don't quite belong anywhere, maybe you're not meant to fit into the world as it is. Maybe you're here to help reshape it into something more honest and alive. There's a pattern that repeats for those who feel out of place. A quiet exile, a spiritual displacement, a life lived on the fringes, observing and sensing while others play roles that never felt like their own. Carl Jung noticed this over and over. He saw that some souls carry an archetype, a blueprint of consciousness that moves through life in unique ways. Among these is the archetype of the outsider, not just someone who feels alone, but someone who sees differently. Because of this vision, the outsider often finds themselves pushed to the margins. But this marginal space is not punishment, it's preparation. The outsider carries a depth the collective isn't ready for yet. Their presence disrupts the status quo, exposes the unspoken, and shines light on what others avoid. This truth can make people uncomfortable, not because it's threatening, but because it's real. You might recognize this feeling, walking into a room and sensing you don't fit the vibe, questioning what everyone else seems to accept without thought, feeling uneasy with group consensus and silent rules. It's not rebellion, it's integrity. You're not difficult, you're being called. Jung called this the individuation process, the soul's journey away from the mask and back toward its essence. This journey forces a break, a rupture between false belonging and authentic truth. The outsider lives in that break, walking alone not because they reject connection, but because they can't betray what they know. There are other archetypes that might speak to you. The wounded healer who turns pain into healing, the hermit who withdraws not to hide, but to reconnect with what's real, the seer who sees beneath masks and speaks truths others fear. These aren't just stories or fantasies. They are living in energies guiding souls like yours, souls that have always felt out of place, not because something's wrong, but because something deep and powerful is present. The world has often misunderstood you, labeled you too emotional, too sensitive, too intense, but that intensity is your gift. It's the spark that won't let you settle for less than what's true. There's a part of you that has always felt too much, too different, too deep, too sensitive for the world around you. Maybe you tried to mute that difference, to squeeze yourself into molds that never quite fit, to become someone easier for others to understand. But no matter how much you bent or compromised, something inside refused to be silenced. That something is your soul. And you've carried your story in silence for so long, a story too complex or raw for most to hear. Carl Jung once said that the evil thrives in the world because people don't tell their stories. Your silence isn't weakness. It's been a waiting space for the right moment, for the right listeners. You aren't broken or wrong. You're a mirror that reflects parts of others they don't want to see, parts they haven't faced yet. It's no wonder they turn away. Your difference was never about being rejected. It was about playing a role far bigger than fitting in. Awakening, remembering, leading by simply being. You've spent years trying to shrink what makes you stand out, trying to be like everyone else, but your soul never agreed to that plan. It came to embody something raw and real, truth, depth, feeling, presence, and truth is never a shape that fits neatly into expectations. Jung taught that the self, the core of who you are, doesn't need permission or approval to exist. It only needs your room to breathe, to unfold. When you finally stop fighting against your nature, that space begins to open inside you. Power doesn't come from being louder or from convincing others to understand. Real strength is born in an acceptance. Not the kind that depends on outside validation, but the deep, unshakable kind that grows from within. You learn to see your sensitivity not as a flaw, but as a spiritual antenna attuned to subtle truths. Your need to retreat isn't fear or avoidance. It's a way to protect your energy. Your hunger for meaning isn't unrealistic. It's your soul calling you back to what matters, to what's real. With that acceptance, you start to build your life around your own rhythm instead of trying to dance to someone else's tune. Solitude becomes sacred, and you allow yourself to say no without justification. Silence turns into a teacher, intuition your guide. You stop chasing illusions and begin creating a reality that mirrors your true self. Presence becomes your signature, and that presence transforms the world around you, not by force, but by quiet, undeniable power. You no longer need to explain who you are. You simply live it, and those who are meant to see you will feel your energy in the calm confidence you carry, in the way you hold space without needing to control it. Your authenticity speaks louder than words ever could. You become a living revolution, not one that shouts to be heard, but one that exists as proof that change is possible. You are already the change. Accepting yourself fully can be terrifying, Jung said, but it's also the doorway to freedom. Maybe you've always been the different one because you're the first to break free. The first to challenge old stories, to seek depth when others settle for distraction, to walk a path the world isn't ready to understand yet. This isn't a burden, but a calling. You weren't made to play a part, skate or fit in with the crowd. You were born to remember frequency, to live a truth that unsettles others because it shakes illusions and opens doors. You don't need a platform or a title. You only need to be exactly who you are. That alone is your purpose. If you've ever felt like the odd one out, know this. Your difference was never a mistake. It's your frequency, your gift, your soul's signature. Jung said the greatest privilege is becoming who you truly are. You are becoming. You are not lost, not strange, not rejected. You are sovereign, redirected, alive in your own truth. You were never meant to belong to the crowd. You were meant to awaken yourself, and in doing so, awaken the world around you.